checking us on Facebook. Tim Black. There you go. Tim Black. Tim Black. All right, folks. Tim Black. All right, folks, we're live now. We're live. Hey, everybody, how you doing? My name is Tim Black. Welcome to another edition of the Tim Black at Night Show. And I have Congressman Khanna. Hey, Ro, how you doing?
Great to be back on your show, Tim.
Man, thank you for taking time out. I understand you have a vote coming up soon.
We do at 6:30, but I'm looking forward to spending the next half hour chatting with you.
Man, that's fantastic. Thanks for squeezing this in. I'll jump right to it, Ro. I heard you and a very popular senator are kind of teaming up on some legislation. Could you tell the audience about it?
Absolutely. Bernie Sanders and I last week introduced the Stop BEZOS Act, and the idea is very simple. At a time you've got companies that are multi-billion-dollar companies, or in some cases a trillion-dollar company, it is absurd that you have folks working at those companies that aren't being able to put food on the table, that are making $10, $11, are relying on public benefits. I mean, think about it. You work hard, you choose to work at a company that is one of the richest in the world, and you still aren't able to make ends meet. And so our legislation says these companies need to be responsible for those workers. Instead of you and I, the taxpayers, subsidizing their public benefits, the companies need to pay for their public benefits instead of putting their money into stock options and executives.
So is there like a threshold that companies would have to be at? Because I'm seeing some of the pushback, and you got your conservatives who say, well, we don't want to tax companies that are creating jobs. So what's the threshold where this would apply to?
Well, it's companies that are over 500 people and that are over $1 billion market cap. So these are companies, let's just put this in context. These are companies that are making tons of money, that are some of the wealthiest in the world: Amazon, Walmart, McDonald's. Their CEOs are making tons of money. They can afford to pay their workers at least a $15 minimum wage. And if they do that, then they won't have the tax. So it's another way of getting wages up. Now, you know who did this is Henry Ford. In 1914, Henry Ford doubled wages in this country. It was a phenomenal announcement. He said people aren't going to be making $2.50 a day. They're going to make $5 a day. $5 a day in today's wages is $120. What's $120? 8 hours. That is $15 a day. That means Henry Ford was paying people the equivalent of a $15 wage in 1914. If he could do it back then, I think in 2018, some of the wealthiest companies in the world can do it. And by the way, half the country wanted Henry Ford to run for president. So what I've said is all these billionaires who suddenly think they should be president, maybe they can start by raising the wages of their employees.
That's an interesting fact, man. I had no idea. So there was a business magnate, Henry Ford, who decided he was going to unilaterally, without pressure, he was going to raise wages of his workers?
Yeah, doubled them. It was huge news. The whole auto industry was upset at him. One day they were making $2.50 an hour, and the next day they came in and he said, I'm going to be paying you $2.50 a day. Next day they were making $5 a day. It would be as if the Amazon CEO, Jeff Bezos, said, I'm going to start paying everyone not $12 an hour, $20, $24 an hour. I mean, big news. And Amazon, they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to set a new standard. We're not anti-Bezos. I love entrepreneurs. I love innovation. I represent Silicon Valley. My wife buys a ton of packages from Amazon. I get Amazon packages on my door. What I'm saying is, why aren't the workers there also benefiting from that business? Why aren't they also partaking in that success? The success should be not just for the few concentrated people at the top, it should be for workers as well. And so Senator Sanders and I are saying we've got to give people a pay raise who are doing the work and still aren't able to make ends meet.
I understand you introduced some other legislations, like a legislation that's in the same vein, the Corporate Responsibility and Taxpayer Protection Act. Is that very similar in the House?
It's the exact same bill. I introduced it a year and a half ago. Very few people paid attention. And then, of course, Senator Sanders introduces it in a good way. And he also knows how to pick the right moment. He does it right when Bezos announces that they've got $1 trillion market cap. And now the whole country's talking about it. And so it's one of the remarkable things I've realized about Senator Sanders is he understands how to communicate ideas simply in ways that break through in our media. And we need to do that as a Democratic Party.
I hear you. I hear you. I guess that Bernie still has that mojo. When he gets attached to something, it kind of gives it a lot more legs in the media. But I have seen you make some stops at various outlets, talking about the bill. So how would it be implemented, Ro? How would you go about, if it were to pass, how would it be implemented?
Well, basically, it'd be a tax on these companies for the public benefits that their employees consumed if they weren't paying a fair wage. So the IRS would calculate what the public benefits are that their employees are using, and Amazon or Walmart or McDonald's would have to pay that tax. So the taxpayers weren't subsidizing it. Now, they'd be exempt from that tax if they paid a $15 minimum wage. So tomorrow, if BEZOS comes out and he says everyone at Amazon is going to make $15, no tax. Second, one of the concerns which I share is this going to incentivize companies to discriminate, right? We don't want a company to say, okay, I'm not going to hire moms with young kids, single mothers with young kids, or people who are disabled. And so the bill has very strict anti-discrimination provisions, which if you get caught discriminating against a person in hiring them based on their status, based on them being disabled or a single mother, then you will have huge liability as a corporation, and your executives will have huge liability to prevent any discrimination of that kind. And the IRS would be able to administer it. The hope is that none of the companies will pay a tax, and they will figure out that it's just better economics for them to raise wages to $15. People say, well, why can't you just be for a minimum wage increase? I'm for the $15 minimum wage, but we've been talking about that for the last 20 years, and it doesn't go up. This is making the point that the taxpayers are hurting because of that. You and I are subsidizing these workers. And when people think of a $15 minimum wage, a lot of times they think, wow, this is going to hurt small business, or this is going to be giving money to high school kids. But when you put it in context that the world's richest companies are paying their workers less than they can afford to live, then people say, yeah, something's wrong with that picture.
I hear you. You just kind of shed light on one of the pushbacks I was reading about, where they were saying, well, this would intensify or incentivize people to discriminate. But if you already had these provisions baked into the cake, I'm wondering where they're getting that assumption from.
Well, you can always say that people can act on bad motives and discriminate, but that's why we have very, very strong antitrust discrimination laws. Now, they come and say, well, people aren't going to enforce those laws, which may be true in terms of hard to sue these big companies. But if you have the penalties very, very severe, then you're going to disincentivize these companies from doing that. So it's baked into the law. Here's what goes on, Tim. I mean, when you pick a fight with these wealthiest corporations in the world, your own side gets a little bit scared. And you get a lot of people suddenly pointing out all the things that could go wrong. Look, no legislation is perfect. Every legislation has certain things that you can nitpick. But when you get to the basics of this and you go out to Ohio or Pennsylvania or Michigan and talk to real people and you say, do you think it's fair that a corporation is worth $1 trillion and their own employees aren't making ends meet and are having to rely on nutritional assistance and public housing? Is that what the American dream is about? I don't know a single American who would say, oh, that's fair. Yeah, those corporations should be paying those poor wages. Of course they say those corporations should raise wages. So in the Beltway, we get caught up in all this op-eds and economic analysis and PhDs, and we lose sight of the basic fact. The basic fact is it's unfair that people are making billions of dollars and other folks aren't putting food on the table. This is not some rocket science point.
One of the questions was, what if Bezos decides, well, I'm going to go ahead and take the tax hit instead of paying workers? Like, I don't understand why that would benefit him. Why not do this, do the thing that is like the humanitarian thing? But They are saying that that's a possibility that if it were to pass, that not just Bezos, because we want to be clear, folks, we're not just talking about one corporation. We're talking about Disney. We're talking about, as Ro mentioned, McDonald's and other big corporations. So what if they take the hit, Ro, and say, you know what, we'd rather just pay the tax, and we're still left with employees who are not getting, a livable wage?
They could, but I don't think they would do that because the tax would cover all public benefits from their employees. And that would not just cover people making up to $20,000, $30,000. I mean, people may have some forms of student loans. They may have public housing. They may have all kinds of benefits. And so that would be a pretty hefty tax on these companies. Whereas, according to Amazon, they already pay most people over $15. And you're talking about, in their own opinion, only some employees are making $10 or $11. It'd be much better for them to increase their wages to $15 instead of having a calculation of the public benefits that every single employee is using. And that's why this is something that's going to incentivize them to raise wages. They're not going to want to sit there to be paying a tax penalty for every public benefit that their employees are using.
What about the part-time workers, Ro, the folks who don't work enough hours? I know that's sort of like a practice in Walmart where they say, okay, well, you know what, we're going to cap you at 32 hours. Yeah. That way we don't have to compensate you. How does that factor into your legislation?
Well, that is a really important question. And that's one of the big challenges because, you know, some people, of course, if they only genuinely want part-time work, you can't hold a company responsible if you say, you know, they only want to work 10, 15 hours. But the reality, as you know, is that's not the case. A lot of times people are willing to work 35, 40 hours, and they're not getting the reliable hours. So in this case, what it's requiring the company to do is offer everyone reliable hours if they want it. Don't make people part-time employees to save the bottom line, and these people then are stuck without having the ability to make ends meet. So the bill requires, if you want an exemption, you need to have $15 an hour, and you have to offer people reliable hours. We can debate whether that should be 35 hours, 40 hours, but you need to be able to do that to offer the exemption. Now, if the person doesn't want to take it, then you're not on the hook. If the person says, no, you know, I only can do 20 hours, fine. But you have got to offer those reliable hours to those individuals.
Yeah, I think the legislation sounds great. I don't know how much I believe it can pass under the climate, with the Republicans owning both the House and the Senate. But I love the idea that we're pushing forth that conversation that we need to value workers. I'm even seeing some people on the right embrace this legislation. I don't know if they're doing it for the same reasons that you and Senator Bernie Sanders are sponsoring it. But have you noticed any difference in the tone that you're seeing from some people on the right?
I have. I was shocked. I was talking to Tucker Carlson, and he comes out supporting the legislation. I thought he was going to oppose it. And the reason is they don't like the taxpayers picking up the bill for these employees. And so it's just common sense. People say, look, you make every choice correct in your life. You're working hard, right? That's the American dream. You pick a company. You're lucky enough to pick a company that happens to be one of the best, most richest companies in the world, and you still can't make ends meet. There's something fundamentally broken about that. And then you say the taxpayers are subsidizing those employees? Come on. And so this is something that I think appeals across the board. And it's so important for progressives to talk about this because it's the type of message that's going to help us win back the people we lost. Folks who said, my life's not getting better. Donald Trump came in there and he said, you got to blame people who don't look like you. Blame those new immigrants. Blame those countries overseas. And we're saying that's not the problem. You know who you need to blame? You need to blame some of these corporations that aren't paying you a fair wage, that have forgotten the type of philosophy like Henry Ford that built America. We got to come back in this country to valuing work, and we're going to stand up for a pay raise for workers in this country. I think that's the type of message that's going to win back a lot of people we lost.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's definitely the tone. Just having the conversation at all, Ro, I think is very beneficial to turning out the right types of voters, educating them, and having to actually look at who is making life harder for them. Not the immigrants, not folks in urban areas, not black folks, not Latinos, but the actual culprits are being the greedy. And Jeff Bezos, folks, just so you know, he's worth at least $163.5 billion. And he's living well. We're just saying pass that on to the workers. What else would you say about this act as you guys champion for it, as you guys try to push it through? Are you getting any responses from the more moderate Democrats?
We have. We've got quickly 9 co-sponsors on the bill, some of them Democrats from all different parts of the country, and we're working on getting more because the moderates, they understand. They're saying, look, don't demonize business. And no one is demonizing entrepreneurs. No one begrudges folks their billions of dollars. They're just saying, you got to give workers some stake in this, right? We can't have an economy where the only people who are benefiting are the shareholders and the CEOs and the executives. You've got to give a piece of the pie to the people doing the actual work. And you hear, very simply, I say, if you bag groceries, you should be able to buy groceries. If you prepare a meal and serve a meal, you should be able to buy a meal at a place. This is not a tough demand. This is kind of the American promise, the American dream. And that's all we're asking for. And I think the more, sometimes we make things too complicated in the Democratic Party, and we trot out all these economists, they're back and forth. I read all these articles and this theory, that theory, this incentive, and you stop and you think about it. You talk to people and you say, do you think that's fair? Do you really think our economy is fair where people are working a hard week? They're doing everything you ask them to do and they're still not making it? Think of how that person feels, where they have to rely on public assistance. You think they feel proud and good? No, they don't. And they think it's unfair. Why is it that their work is not being rewarded?
Yeah. Hey, Ro, we lost you there. We got your audio, but we lost your video. While you work on that, I just want to bring people up to speed. I want you to know, I'm real transparent. I support this bill because I support workers, I support unions, I support average Americans just trying to make ends meet. One of the big points about this, Ro, is that Amazon gets all these subsidies, guys. I don't think, did we tell them what the name of the bill, what the acronym stands for? I don't know if we did. It's the, what is it? The Subsidies Act?
Basically the idea is to get subsidies, get Amazon off of subsidies, get Walmart off of subsidies, and the subsidies for these companies.
Right. Let's talk about those subsidies real quick, because I was reading something about Amazon getting, $1.1 billion in state and local subsidies for their fulfillment warehouses. But when they did the data, the EPI looked at this. They did a report back in February that showed that these communities where they have these warehouses, Ro, they're not improving the economy. These warehouses, the people in surrounding areas are not benefiting. Have you heard about this?
I have. And the act is a Stop Bad Employers Act by zeroing out their subsidies. So the point is, you can't be giving billions of dollars of tax breaks, tax credits, and actual help to these employers when they're not doing things for the local community. And you're absolutely right. A lot of these warehouse conditions, they're not safe. The wages aren't that high. And so they're not improving necessarily the quality of life of people. They're improving the quality of life of their stockholders, and they're improving the executives. And we're saying that doesn't have to be the case. Well, every community wants an Amazon headquarters. Fine, great. But make sure that that community is really benefiting. Have a headquarters or a second headquarters where workers are making good money, where they can go and spend that money. That was Henry Ford's theory. They buy cars. These workers may buy Amazon products. Let's create that economy where everyone has a stake, and let's give them, their kids, the tools in the new economy. That people say, well, this is going to encourage automation, right? That's one of the arguments they say. You're going to raise wages and people are going to encourage automation. Well, first of all, you can say this about anything. What should we then move to a servant economy? We shouldn't raise wages so that we can, because we don't want to encourage automation. Come on. Of course, it may encourage automation, but the answer to that is right now we need to make sure everyone has dignity and a decent workplace. And as automation increases, we got to make sure those kids get the skills and the education to operate machines and be prepared in the new economy. But you can't say to me, let's help the kids get these new tools and let's not help their parents put a roof on their head or food on the table. You got to deal in the here and now. And I represent Silicon Valley. I'm all for teaching folks how to code and tech skills and bringing technology. But we got to live in the real world. The real world is you got parents who are making $10, $12 an hour who can't afford the rent, who can't afford to give their kids the right nutrition. And we got to deal with that. And we can, because we've got the richest companies invented in human history. It'd be one thing if we were an economy that was just scraping by. We're producing extraordinary wealth, so much wealth that the billionaires don't even know what to do with it. I mean, they're trying to figure out how to donate it. Well, I got an idea. Start to don't donate it. Start to pay people what they deserve.
Absolutely. You know what to do with the money. Pay your workers more money. That's what you can do with the money. Absolutely. Yeah, I just want to reinforce the comment, Ro, that because one of the pushbacks we get, brother, is that they say, well, hey, you know what? These subsidies, people are fighting to bring Amazon warehouses to their area. In fact, in my state of Maryland, where Ben Jealous is running, that's
I love Ben.
You love Ben. Ben's a great guy, man. And that's one of the things they say, well, he's got to be able to get that Amazon facility in Maryland. Like, that's a voting, like, a priority. Like, people are really looking forward to it. But when you peel back the onion, Ro, if the people in those areas are not seeing economic advancement because of these warehouses, if that's not the case, then what's the purpose of bringing these corporations in and bringing in warehouses?
No, I get it. Look, I represent a district with Google and Apple and Facebook is there, Tesla, Intel, all over the country. I go, they say, how do we get these companies into our communities? And I get it. Of course you want to get Amazon or Apple or Google into these communities, but it has to be done in a way that's going to enrich the community, not enrich the company. And by that, it's got to mean good wages for folks there. It can't be bankrupting the cities where they're giving all these tax breaks, and then what it suffers? The public education suffers. No, it's got to be, you got to give federal grants, help these companies come in, make sure people are being paid a decent wage, and then it's gonna work. I mean, but so no one is saying don't bring in tech or don't bring in these companies, but don't bring them in at the expense of your workers, at the expense of your tax base. Bring them in a way that's going to work for ordinary Americans. I don't think the stuff we're talking about is that radical. What we're saying, I really don't. I'm just saying, I think what we're saying is we celebrate entrepreneurship. We celebrate innovation. We celebrate and get why Americans want these companies. We just want to make sure that every worker is benefiting from that all Americans are benefiting from that, and not have this record income inequality that we see. I mean, there's something off. And I was talking to someone in my office, and they said that James Madison in the 1792 warned that economic inequality would hurt democracy. Now, our founders, they didn't think you and I were part of the political class or political community, but they had a political community of back then, of white men. But here's what they knew, that for white men, they had to have a relative economic equality because they didn't want the aristocracy. They would brag about the fact that in America, everyone could have access to land and everyone had basic economic success or economic rights. And this was central to them forming a democracy. The type of economic inequality we see now has hurt the ability for us to be equal citizens. Does anyone really believe that the CEO at Walmart is treated as an equal citizen as the worker who's making $12 an hour? No, come on. They're not. They don't have the same. And that's what hurts the American ethos. It used to be you went to I grew up in Philadelphia. You went to an Eagles game and you sat in the stands and it didn't matter. You had a billionaire or you had someone who was a worker, and that we did things together. There wasn't class. Right. But now you've introduced into this country a sense of class. You've introduced a sense of the people who have been left out. And what we're talking about is changing that. We're saying have some responsibility to make sure everyone has basic economic dignity so that they can be an equal citizen, which is the founding of our country.
Well, I would like to say, I would like to agree with you, but I don't know if I can. I think there's always been income inequality, at least in my community. But I get the broader idea that we want to fight back against that income inequality, right? So I do agree with you there. So guys, that's basically it, Ro. We're almost out of time. I just want to ask you a couple questions. What do you think about this so-called progressive, like, insurgence that's happening? What are your thoughts about it? Do you think it's real? And do you think, if it is real, do you think it will continue into 2020?
Well, the way I see it, it's correlated with the Tim Black show. Huh? So ever since you started broadcasting, we got all these progressive candidates running. But I do think whether it's your show, it's other shows, it's progressive radio, the energy in this party is with a lot of progressive activists, and they are winning. They're winning they won in New York. They won down in Florida with Gillum, who may be the governor. They won a great seat in Boston. You're going to have an energetic new group of folks. I said it's great. They're going to be people who are far outflanking me. I'm gonna look like the reasonable, moderate person almost in comparison to some of these folks, which is terrific because they're going to push the dialogue in a positive direction. And I'm very enthusiastic about the next Congress.
You know, recently Tulsi Gabbard went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and also before that, what is his name? The guy from Tesla, he went on. What's his name? I know you know him.
Oh, yeah, Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, man. So we need to get you on the Joe Rogan podcast, man, and kind of just hang back and smoke some weed with Joe Rogan.
I'd love to be on his show. If you know him, tell him to get me on. He's mentioned me a couple times positively. And, and it's the only time my non-political friends say, oh, who is this? You know, we heard of you. They don't tune into CNN and other stuff, but they all love Joe Rogan.
That's right. Look, me and you both need to be on that show. Well, anyway, hey, look, Ro.
We can do it together.
That's right, man. We'll tag team it. Hey, look, man, Ro, thank you for taking time out, man. Go make your vote. Ladies and gentlemen, Ro Khanna. Ro's on Twitter. He's on Facebook. He's everywhere. He's Congressman out of California. Ro, if you want to tell him how to follow you, please do.
Well, I appreciate it. They can look me up at Rep Ro Khanna on Twitter, on Facebook, and always good to be on your show. Hope to do it again.
You got it, brother. Take care, guys. All right now, Ro. We'll see you soon. You got it, my friend. All right, guys, thank you for tuning into the Tim Black at Night Show. Remember, this show is brought to you by none other than justinform.com, where we do not sell your data. We won't trick you. We don't steal your privacy. None of that stuff. It's just a social media platform for people that want to be informed. Go to justinform.com and tell them Tim Black sent you. Thank you. Tim Black. Tim Black. Tim Black. Yes, I am. Truth. Funny. Tim Black. I am TimBlack.com. Tim Black.